Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's update on now Hurricane Helene. So, Hurricane Helene has strengthened into a Category 1 hurricane as of the 4 p.m. update, with 85-mile-per-hour winds, northerly movement, and a minimum central pressure of 978 millibars. Hurricane Helene is really starting to look a lot better organized on the satellite, and we are now starting to see indications of potentially rapid intensification with Hurricane Helene, unfortunately. And as we look at the cone going into 1 a.m. tonight, a Hurricane Helene is expected to strengthen to a 110 mile per hour Category 2 hurricane with 130 mile per hour gusts moving to the north-northeast. And now we are expecting a Category 4 major hurricane as we go into 1 p.m. tomorrow afternoon with 130 mile per hour winds and 160 mile per hour gusts moving to the north. So the intensity on Helene just keeps getting worse and worse, unfortunately, for my friends in the Florida Panhandle and southwestern Georgia. We are now expecting a landfall right over or just to the east of Apalachicola tomorrow evening, probably around 6 to 8 p.m. as a Category 4 hurricane, low to mid-grade Category 4 hurricane, and just going to move just west of Tallahassee as we go into tomorrow night through southwestern Georgia. We are still going to be looking at a Category 1 hurricane with 80-mile-per-hour winds and 105-mile-per-hour gusts in southwestern Georgia, moving to the north-northwest as we go into 1 a.m. Friday morning. And then Helene is going to move just west of Atlanta as we go into early Friday morning, likely bringing tropical storm force winds, maybe even hurricane force wind gusts to the city of Atlanta as it does so. Helene is going to move over northeastern Tennessee as we go into 1 p.m. Saturday afternoon as a 40-mile-per-hour post-tropical cyclone with 65-mile-per-hour gusts still moving to the west-northwest, just east of Nashville, Tennessee. And then Helene is going to kind of decay over southwestern Kentucky as we go into 1 a.m. Saturday morning or Sunday morning. 30-mile-per-hour winds, 45-mile-per-hour gusts moving to the west-southwest. As we go into 1 p.m. Sunday afternoon, 25-mile-per-hour winds, 35-mile-per-hour gusts moving to the east-northeast. And then going into 1 p.m. Sunday or Monday, I believe, a 15-mile-per-hour post-tropical cyclone with 25-mile-per-hour gusts kind of just decaying over southwestern Kentucky, which is going to lead to a lot of heavy rainfall, unfortunately, across the Tennessee Valley. So, taking a look at the key messages for Hurricane Helene, this just keeps getting worse and worse. A catastrophic and deadly storm surge is likely along portions of the Florida Big Bend coast, where inundation could reach as high as 20 feet above ground. 20 feet above ground now, along with destructive waves. There is also a danger of life-threatening storm surge along the remainder of the west coast of the Florida Peninsula. Residents in those areas should follow advice given by local officials and evacuate if told to do so. Potentially catastrophic hurricane force winds are expected within the eyewall of Helene as it makes landfall in the Florida Big Bend region late Thursday. Preparations to protect life and property should be completed by early Thursday before tropical storm conditions arrive. Damaging and life-threatening hurricane force winds, especially in gusts, will penetrate well inland over portions of northern Florida and southern Georgia late Thursday and Thursday night, where hurricane warnings are in effect. Strong wind gusts are also likely further north across portions of northern Georgia and the Carolinas, particularly over the higher terrain of the southern Appalachians. Catastrophic and life-threatening flash and urban flooding, including landslides, is expected across portions of the southern Appalachians through Friday. Considerable to locally catastrophic flash and urban flooding is likely for northwestern and northern Florida and southeast through Friday. Widespread minor to moderate river flooding is likely, and isolated major river flooding is possible. Hurricane and tropical storm conditions are expected over northeastern portions of the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico this evening, where tropical storm and hurricane warnings are in effect. Tropical storm conditions are occurring over portions of western Cuba within the tropical storm warning area, and hurricane conditions are possible this evening within the hurricane watch area. Helene will bring heavy rain to portions of the western Caribbean with potentially significant flooding across western Cuba and the northeastern Yucatan Peninsula into early Thursday. So you need to be preparing for Helene if you live across the Florida Panhandle and much of western Georgia, even out eastern Alabama, as we are seeing some of the strongest wording I have seen in a while since Ian, I would say, in the key messages. Taking a look at the latest watches and warnings. I mean, hurricane warnings extend into central Georgia now in the red area, southwest Georgia, southeast Alabama, the Florida panhandle into the Big Bend area are all under hurricane warnings. Tropical storm warnings for the rest of Georgia, eastern Alabama, the western Florida panhandle, the Florida peninsula, all of South Carolina, and as far north as northwestern or southwestern North Carolina now. And we have hurricane watches for the Tampa Bay area. We have hurricane warnings for the Yucatan Peninsula, including Cancun, tropical storm warnings in the blue areas as well, and hurricane watches and warnings for western Cuba continue as Helene hangs around in the southeastern Gulf of Mexico this afternoon. Taking a look at our tropical storm force wind probabilities, and now the probabilities expand to include eastern Alabama, all the Florida Panhandle and most of the Florida Peninsula, especially the western Florida Peninsula, and all of the state of Georgia, even into southeastern Tennessee, could experience tropical storm force wind gusts, unfortunately, from Hurricane Helene now, resulting in massive amounts of power outages across much of Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Taking a look at the latest rainfall accumulations with the Weather Prediction Center, looking at 1 to 2 inches of rain in the light green areas, 2 to 4 inches of rain in the dark green areas, 4 to 6 inches of rain in the yellow areas. This includes southwestern Kentucky, western Tennessee, and the Boot Heel of Missouri, where Helene is expected to stall between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then as we start going into eastern Alabama, most of Georgia, western Florida, the Florida Panhandle, looking at 6 to 8 inches of rain in the darker yellow shade, 8 to 12 inches of rain in the orange shade. So this includes Atlanta, this includes Tallahassee, and in western areas of North and South Carolina, in the red areas, 12 to 16 inches, and some areas in the mountains could see as much as 12 to 20 inches in the maroon and even isolated pink areas. So catastrophic flooding is going to be likely, especially across northeastern Georgia and the western Carolinas from Hurricane Helene, as well as the central Florida Panhandle, including Tallahassee, where we could see as much as 12 to 16 inches of rain, where Hurricane Helene makes landfall. Taking a look at the latest flash flooding outlook, we have a high risk of flooding across northeast Georgia and the western areas of South and North Carolina in the pink area. Also now have a high risk of flooding around Tallahassee and far southwestern areas of Georgia. We have a moderate risk of flooding for eastern Alabama, much of the Florida Panhandle, most of Georgia, western areas of the Carolinas, and southeastern Tennessee in the red. We have a large slight risk of flooding across the Tennessee Valley in the southeast in the yellow, and a marginal risk of flooding in the dark green for Hurricane Helene. So unfortunately, we are looking at major life-threatening flooding, especially across northeastern Georgia and the western Carolinas, as well as southwestern Georgia and around the Tallahassee area. So make sure you are preparing now for dangerous flooding. And finally, the worst part of Hurricane Helene, and I cannot stress this enough, is going to be the storm surge. Starting off along the Florida Panhandle, looking at 1 to 3 feet of storm surge between Walton Bay County line through Mexico Beach, looking at 3 to 5 feet of storm surge from Mexico Beach to Indian Pass, looking at 6 to 10 feet of storm surge around Apalachicola, 10 to 15 feet of storm surge through Carabel, and now the storm or the National Hurricane Center is predicting 15 to 20 feet of storm surge between Carabel and the Swanee River. This is going to be catastrophic and unsurvivable if you do not evacuate this area. So please evacuate if you live anywhere from Apalachicola down through Swanee River, down through Chassahowitzka, down through the Anclot River, as you're going to be seeing anywhere from 8 to 20 feet of storm surge with Hurricane Helene. 5 to 8 inches of, or 5 to 8 feet of storm surge rather for Tampa Bay down through middle of Longboat Key, 4 to 7 feet of storm surge through Englewood, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge down through Flamingo, 1 to 3 feet of storm surge for the Florida Keys, and 1 to 3 feet of storm surge along the northeast Florida coast, coastal Georgia, and much of the South Carolina coastline as well. So make sure you are making last-minute hurricane preparations if you live across the Florida Panhandle, southwestern Georgia, even central Georgia, as you are going to be experiencing major hurricane force wind gusts, especially in Florida and southwestern Georgia, when Helene makes landfall. And we are going to be experiencing hurricane force winds and wind gusts well inland across Georgia as we go through Friday morning. So make sure you're preparing for that as well as flooding and major storm surge. Thanks for watching this evening's update. Please stay safe and have a wonderful evening, my friends.